2023 games are in the books. Jeffrey Adler is our new fittest man on earth, and these are our 5 takeaways from the men's field at the 2023 CrossFit Games. First up, if you want to be an elite athlete, you need to have an engine. When we look at all the events from the first 3 days at the CrossFit Games, a few stand out to having the highest proportion of athletes from the top 10 of the overall standings in the top 10 of the event finish. So first up, with 8 out of the 10 of the top 10 overall in the top 10 of the event, was the 5K run. Second up with 7 athletes was the bike, and then tied for third with 6 of the top 10 overall athletes in the top 10 of the events were Helena and intervals. So when we look at those, you got the run, 16, 17, 18 minutes just running. You got the bike, again, 40, 45 minutes for those top guys of pure cardio work. And then both Helena and intervals had the monostructural portion of it. You had the run component of Helena and you had the rowing component of the intervals. So to see those top 10 athletes in the top 10 of those events more than any of the other events at the CrossFit Games, it'll be interesting to see if more athletes who are on the cusp of the top 10 spend more of the off season this year doing the cardio, doing the monostructural engine or elements to build that engine to see if they can get that boost up into the top 10 next year. Second point of interest from the games this year is just how nearly flawless Adler and Roman Khrenikov's performances were, before Khrenikov's injury. So when you look at Jeffrey Adler, so he had a 15th and a 21st on the first day, but his other 10 events, all top 8. Roman Khrennikov, before his injury, he had 8 out of his events in the top 10, or had top 10 event finishes. Then even when you go back to last year, Justin Medeiros, he had 12 out of 14 events in the top 10. His worst event finish was 18th. Last year, Roman Khrennikov, he had 10 out of 14 events in the top 10. His worst event finish was 15th. And going back to 2021, Justin Medeiros, fittest on earth for the first time, his worst event was 15th with 13 out of 15 events in the top 10. So as we look forward to next year, we got a slew of guys who are all in contention for fittest on earth. Adler's coming back. You'll have Khrennikov, who'll be hungry with a healed foot. Medeiros is likely to come back with a ton of energy. Ricky Garrard is already chomping at the bit to come back. Vellner will be back. Fikowski will be back after their top performances. And then you got newcomers like Dallin Pepper who will be hungry for a podium finish. So with all these guys in the mix, all these guys have the capability to be the fittest on earth next year. It's going to be who has the fewest mental errors or who doesn't fail a rep and has a bad event finish. You're going to need to be in the top 10 for all or almost all of your events in order to be the fittest on earth in 2024. One of the big storylines that we saw in 23 was training camps. So just the evolution of training camps, seeing more and more athletes join these big training camps such as Mayhem, Proven, HWPO. But when we look at the top 10 of the CrossFit Games this year, I don't think being a part of those main camps was a strategic advantage. So rolling through the top 5, Jeffrey Adler works with his coach, Caroline Lambre, really kind of on an independent standpoint. Pat Vellner works with Michelle Latondra out of Decacomp, but again, really training on his own. You had Roman Khrennikov. He was with one of the big groups in Mayhem, training out of Cookville this year. Fikowski works on an independent basis with a coach. In 5th place, Dallin Pepper. He's with the Brute Strength group down in Naples. So again, only 2 out of the top 5 athletes are with the larger camps. And then when we roll through the rest of the top 10, Jonakowski, he's with the Training Plan group. Smaller group, mostly European based, but not necessarily the reach the other ones have. Chandler Smith, working as an independent athlete. Jay Crouch, working under Rob Forte at Reebok CrossFit Frankston down in Melbourne. Again, smaller group, really just athletes in that facility. Then Lazar Ducic, he's one of the Mayhem athletes, but again, training on his own over in Europe. And then Jella Hoste with the No Shortcuts group, smaller group, not really as big as some of the others we see. So it'll be interesting to see what the evolution of these large training camps are going forward. One of the interesting points we see from the CrossFit Games this year is really starting to see the establishment of these career athletes on the men's side. So obviously the sport has matured going into its 16th career CrossFit Games, and we're starting to see that involvement of an athlete in the sport. So you have Jeffrey Adler at 29 years old, gets his first CrossFit Games podium and fittest on earth there. So again, just the work that went into that takes years, but again, in the prime of his career, he's had 2 top 5s before this in the previous 3 games. So he's right there. You got Patrick Vellner at 33 years old on the podium again for the second time in 3 years. Roman Khrennikov at 28 years old, been around for a while. Finally, he's able to compete in back-to-back years in Madison with his second podium in a row, again, 28 years old. Vikowski in 4th place, 32 years old. And so we're seeing, again, the evolution of the sport and the evolution of these athletes. And, even Jonikowski, 28 years old, it's his 9th CrossFit Games, still right in the mix, in the top 10 in 6th place. So interesting to see the evolution of the sport. And then when we got some of these newcomers like Dallin Pepper, just 20 years old, right in the mix in 5th place, it'll be interesting to see what the long arc of his career is over the next decade, or maybe even longer if he's able to stay away from injuries, to see what a career CrossFit Games athlete looks like now that we are in a relatively mature space for the sport itself. And the last takeaway from the CrossFit Games this year is just the lack of flash we saw in some of the athletes on the men's side. So the big one obviously was Justin Medeiros, fell on the bike in event 1, but even when you looked at him in the chipper, the transitions between the gymnastics and the pig flips in the back, he just no gas in the tank, just looked absolutely exhausted, which not what we expected in event 2 from the 2-time fittest man on earth. He was able to battle back to the 13th and at times in the competition showed some flashes of brilliance, but just kind of overall, just a bit of a struggle for him. I don't know how much was related to the bike crash he had in event 1, or if there was just some more underlying fitness issues or ailments that were bugging him that prevented him to be in contention for fittest on earth this year. Similar, Sam Quant, we learned after the fact that he had a bike crash as well, also spent some time in the medical tent. He's someone, for the first 2 days, kind of expected him to be in that first round of cuts, battled into the top 20, so he was able to compete at Sunday, made it up to 15th, which, after what we saw him on day 1 was probably a win for him, but again, he finished 4th last year, expected a bit more for him to be in the contention again this year, but again, just didn't have the flash that we expected. Jason Hopper, he was 31st, again, somebody that we really expected to be in contention for the top 10. So to see him in 31st, said he was disappointed, but don't have any more details related to that. Cole Sager, for him to be in the first round of cuts after, a decade at the CrossFit Games, not what we expected from him either. For Sager, it was probably going to be a stretch to make it to the top 10, but again, for someone with the experience of him to finish in the mid-30s, really kind of, makes you wonder what was happening with these guys. Hopefully we are able to get a little bit more context from them as everybody's going through the recaps and reflection posts. And as we are seeing, a lot of athletes made trips to the medical tent that we didn't know about in the competition. So hopefully everybody's able to come back a little bit stronger with a few lessons learned. It was just interesting to see how some of them just looked a little flat throughout the entire competition. With that, thanks for watching. Really appreciate you making it this far. Hit like, hit subscribe if you enjoy what we're putting out. Just would help us get the word out there. Follow along on Instagram at Franlung Analytics for some bite-sized doses of stats related to the CrossFit Games season. And if you are looking for some new threads and want to support us a little bit more, check out our merch at franlungsocialclub.com.